Well, hello. I didn't see you there, but are you here to watch our trial on the Confederacy about the Civil War? Well, I sure hope so, because you're gonna watch it anyways.
So, for the Battle of Antietam, I would like to call Gason Badaloose to the stand. Please come up. Thank you. So, I also heard the battle's called Sharpsburg. Why is that?
It's because it happened in Sharpsburg, Maryland.
Okay. Who were the two generals, the general for the Confederacy and the general for the Union?
Union general was George McClellan, and the Confederate general was Robert E. Lee.
Okay, so the Confederacy lost, yes, but what did McClellan do that he could have done which would have ruined Lee?
He could have pursued Lee's troops. Lee lost the battle, and McClellan had just decided to push a little further. You know, it would have been a huge victory for the Union. Instead, he settled for second best.
Okay, and this is just a personal opinion question. If McClellan had chased after Lee's troops, do you think this could have resulted in Lee's death?
Definitely.
Okay, thank you. Please come to your seat.
For our next witness, I'm calling Michelle Marshall up to the witness stand. Have a seat, ma'am. Today you're going to talk to us about Fort Sumter. Where was that located?
Off the coast of South Carolina by Charleston.
Who was leading the Union?
Robert. I can't remember. Oh, it's Major Robert Anderson. So I could probably do that.
Oh, it's fine. Who was leading the Confederacy?
PGT Beauregard was leading the Confederate attack on the fort.
So who won?
The Confederates won. Eventually, the Unions had to surrender because it was just too much.
I think that's all. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
Our next witness to the stand is Jared Picasso. Please take a seat, sir. You are called here today to talk about the Battle of Chancellorsville. Where did this happen?
It happened not too far away from my home, in Chancellorsville.
All right. Can you tell us who was leading the Union?
From what I heard it was some general named Joseph Hooker.
And what about the Confederate Army? Who was leading them?
From a distance, I saw it looked to be General Robert E. Lee.
Can you tell us who won the battle?
From the looks of it, from what I can see, is that there was not a lot of Union soldiers left. I believe the Confederacy won that battle.
What were the casualties?
Too many to count from what I can see. Bodies alone, as far as the eye can see.
We heard that Stonewall Jackson died in this battle. Was that true?
Yes, I heard about that. He was shot by his own men on accident.
Well, how unfortunate. Thank you, Mr. Picasso, for your time.
Thank you.
For our next battle, I would like to call Margaret Lasan to the witness chair.
Actually, it's Margaret Lassoon.
My bad, Miss Lassoon.
Yeah.
Can you tell us where the Battle of Shiloh occurred?
Tennessee.
So, who led the Union forces?
Ulysses S. Grant.
Did he win?
Yes, he did. The Confederates launched a surprise attack, but they weren't able to like keep their spot or whatever, so they were forced back, and it was a Union victory.
All right, I think that's all. Thank you for your time, Miss Lassoon.
You're welcome.
For the March to the Sea piece, I would like to call Brianna Macalachi to the stands. Please come up. Brianna Macalachi, nice to see you.
What am I here for?
Like I said, for March to the Sea. But please tell me, what was the March to the Sea and who led this march?
It was William Tecumseh Sherman. The march was, he started in Tennessee and practically ran his way through to Atlanta. In his path, he destroyed everything he could, burning down barns, cutting down trees, killing livestock, anything he could do that would decimate southern populations. And to his credit, it worked. Georgia was practically destroyed. It was a huge loss for the Confederacy.
So this burning, pillaging, and killing livestock, what was this called?
It's called total warfare. It's where instead of attacking the army, you attack the civilians instead. It's cruel, but it works.
So you spoke about Atlanta and how he captured it. Was this his goal in the March to the Sea?
Essentially it was. If you capture a state's capital, you capture the state. And capturing Atlanta, he practically decimated Georgia. Even if it wasn't his goal, he sure did a lot for the Union.
Okay, so thank you for your speak about March to the Sea. Thank you. We'll go back to your seat.
For our next witness, I would like to call Stephanie Bingham to the witness chair. All right, ma'am, you were called here today because we were told you have some important information on the Battle of Bull Run. Can you tell us exactly where that occurred?
Not exactly, but I did know it happened in Virginia, and it was also known as the Battle of Manassas by the Confederate soldiers.
Speaking of the Confederacy, who was leading them?
It was General P.G.T.
And on the Union side?
It was General McDowell who was in charge of a Union attack. It was expected to be a Union win, but actually the Confederates won. It was the first major battle of the Civil War, and they lost it.
Well, gee. Thank you for your time.
Arigato gozaimasu.
For our next witness, we're going to call Cricken Machias to the witness chair. So you're called in today to talk about Pikachu Peak. Where did this occur exactly?
About 50 miles north of Tucson, Arizona.
So what exactly happened?
So 120 Confederate Rangers moved westward to occupy Tucson, Arizona, because they wanted to expand the Confederate westward due to the whole push west.
And where does the conflict come in?
So the Union did not like this, so they sent 2,350 pro-Union column from California to meet the Confederate Rangers, like I said, 50 miles north of Tucson, Arizona.
Can you tell us who won?
The Confederates won. The battle is the smallest battle in the Civil War and the most westward, with only 23 soldiers engaging, 13 being from the Union and 10 being from the Confederates.
So who won?
The Confederates won. There was only 11 casualties, 6 being from the Union, 5 being from the Confederates. Even though they were outnumbered, they were still able to repel the 13 Union soldiers, and they were able to prevent a surprise attack on Tucson.
All right, thank you, Mr. Machias, for your time.
Your pleasure.
Next to the stand is Christian Macias. Welcome, good to have you. Today I'm going to have you talk about Gettysburg. Can you tell us where that happened?
It happened in Pennsylvania.
Who was leading the Union?
General George G. Meade.
And against him in the Confederacy?
Robert E. Lee.
So who won?
The Union won this battle. It happened between July 1st to the 3rd of 1863. On the first day, Robert E. Lee met Meade's forces, and they just fought. On the second day, he fought the Union from both left and the right side. And on the third, Lee was losing, so he made the worst decision of his career, and attacked bluntly with 15,000 men, which was a total failure, and on the fourth day, he retreated.
All right, thank you for your time. Okay. For our next witness, I'm calling J. Rod Pariso up to the stand. Have a seat, get comfy, because you're here to talk about Vicksburg. So where did this happen?
This happened in Vicksburg, Mississippi.
And who was leading the Union side?
General Ulysses S. Grant.
What about the Confederate Army?
General John C. Pemberton.
Who won?
The Union won this battle.
All right, I think that's all. Thank you.
The Appomattox Courthouse, I would like to call Brenna McClatchy to the stand. Please come. Good morning.
Morning.
When was the Battle of Appomattox Courthouse?
April 9th, 1865.
Okay, so this was the last day of the Civil War. Who were the two generals that fought?
It was the two largest generals, Confederate General Robert E. Lee and Union General Ulysses S. Grant.
Okay, so who won this battle?
Grant won and secured the final victory for the Union.
Okay. So, what did the Confederate States do after this?
Well, they surrendered, and then they were forced to return back to the Union. The Civil War was fought to keep the Confederate States from succeeding in the first place.
Okay, so did this battle begin and end in the same place?
Actually, yes, the Appomattox Courthouse, it didn't start and end in the Appomattox Courthouse, but it did start in the same guy's home and end in his home again.
Okay, so that's all the details I need. Thank you. You can please come back to your seat. African Americans played a support role in the Civil War. Around 179,000 black men served in the Union Army, which was about 10% of the population of the Army. 19,000 served in the Navy. 40,000 died in the Civil War, 30,000 being of infection or disease. 16 black men were awarded with the Medal of Honor by the end of the Civil War. When captured by Confederates, they were threatened with enslavement. Lincoln responded with the reprisal of Confederate POWs for any mistreatment of blacks. Due to prejudice, blacks didn't serve most combat roles, but served in battles like Milliken's Bend, Nashville, Petersburg, and the assault on Fort Wagner.
There were many technological advances in the Civil War. Rifles advanced and became more accurate. Land and sea torpedoes became a thing and were used mostly by the South. The first successful submarine came to be, and ironclad ships could shoot in any direction and were plated with metal to help defend the ship. Railroads helped a lot during the Civil War, and telegraphs actually came before the Civil War. The North had many advantages, like having a much larger population than the South. Not only that, but they had a lot more money, thanks to having a better industrial area. And they also had more railroads, so sending supplies to soldiers was much easier than it was in the South. Since I told you about the advantages of the North, I'm going to tell you about the advantages of the South. They had very good militant leaders. Not only that, but they also had high morale because the South was fighting to keep their way of life. And most of the battles in the Civil War happened in the South, so they knew their territory. And not only that, but the South also had crash crops that a lot of the North needed. One.
My name is Sally Yeehaw. This is my 15th child.
Welcome back. I would like to discuss the major generals in the Union, starting off with the most important, Ulysses S. Grant. He was the only general to receive 3 surrenders from a Confederate army. He defeated Robert E. Lee at the Battle of Appomattox Courthouse on April 9, 1865, defeating the Confederacy and ending the Civil War. The next general is General Armstrong Custer. He was a bad kid, as you could say, growing up. In 1857, he joined West Point Academy and graduated in 1861 in the last of his class position. He received 726 demerits in the 4 years. and was known as Boy General because he was only 23 when he became Brigadier General in 1863. He distinguished himself at battles like Gettysburg, but would die after the Civil War in the Battle of Little Bighorn in 1876, also known as Custer's Last Stand. The next general is General Nathaniel Banks. Probably known as one of the worst generals in the Union, he was really poor at his job and led several expeditions through Texas, but failed in every single one of them. He was pretty disliked by his men, and no one really looked up to him. The next general is General McClellan, probably known as one of the best generals to his men, but disliked by many politicians and military officials like Abe Lincoln. Lincoln very disliked him. Lincoln removed him from the position because he refused to chase after Lee's men after Antietam into Virginia.
Now I bet you want to know about some Southern generals. Well, I'm going to start off by telling you about probably the most famous of them all, Robert E. Lee. He was a great tactician for the side of the Confederacy. Under his command were General Nathan Bedford Forrest, who was a notorious racist, actually known as the Butcher of Fort Pillow for his ruthless slaughter on Union soldiers that had surrendered to his forces, most of whom were black. He would go on to become the first Grand Lizard of the infamous Ku Klux Klan. One of the more tolerant generals was General PGT, who actually, despite fighting for the Confederacy, would go on to also fight for black suffrage and civil rights after the Civil War had ended.
I'm going to talk to you about the economy of the Civil War, but before we get to that, I'm going to talk pre-Civil War economies. In the North, they were having an industrial revolution, so less things were dependent on agriculture, and everything was more mechanicalized and in a factory. And the South was an agricultural-based economy, dependent on their slave labor. Now, when the Civil War started, it brought out the strengths and weaknesses of their different economies, like the free market or the slave economy. And the North's economy actually thrived during the war because the industrial sector increased their I can't even remember the word. Productions. They increased productions, and even if you had a farm still in the North, it also increased productions because with all of the machinery that was used on farms now, it took less time to harvest and plant more crops, and which made it easier to get them to the troops faster. And also because they were more dependent on machinery, it took less people to work the farms in the North, so more people could go join the army. But in the South, they were kind of sucked for them because most people had to go join the war, and one of the reasons they were so mad about the Emancipation Proclamation is because if they got rid of slaves, it would get rid of their primary labor force, which would kind of suck for their economy because it would bring production down.
There were many political issues that led to the Civil War, some of them being about states' rights and not just slavery. In the South, many states wanted to be able to abolish federal laws that they did not agree with. Also, the President, Abraham Lincoln, actually got elected into office without any votes from the southern states, and this meant that the South no longer had any influence over our government, and their only option was to secede.
Hi, so I'm here to tell you about life in the North pre-Civil War. So life in the North was largely influenced by Puritan values of being hardworking and disciplined. This led to them working long hours, 6 days a week. Jobs in the North were largely industrialized, as they were having an industrial revolution, and even if you worked in agriculture, more things were done by machines nowadays. The North was much more dedicated to education than the South. Of the nation's 300-something high schools at that time, the South only had 30 of them. But despite being more devoted to education, medicine and healthcare were largely underdeveloped, which mixed with their overpopulation led to rampant diseases such as tuberculosis, cholera, yellow fever.
Well, hello there. Welcome back. I bet you want to hear about life in the South after hearing about life in the North. Well, life in the South was mostly made up of agricultural communities. There's an idea that a lot of these farmers owned huge plantations, but that wasn't necessarily true, because huge plantations were for the wealthy farmers out on the waterfront. Most farmers lived out in the backcountry and ran smaller farms. Therefore, they had to have larger families to help tend the crops, you know. Men mostly ran the farms, and they owned the homes, while women worked in the houses and raised the children. If you were a son, you likely learned from your father. If you were a daughter, you learned from your mother.
Judge Goodwin, what is the court's decision?
The jury has ruled that the Confederacy has taken an L.
Thank you.
So which one are we doing?
I'm here with my good dude, Mr. Goodwin.
My dude.
Oh.
Alright, I'm ready to go.
Which one are you?
Because I have an idea for the Appomattox courthouse.
So,
I can
Mr.
Google
Good
one.
Lose. I mean, Bad Lose, how are you?
Oh, man!
Silent treatment, I see.
As always.
You're making this
Alright.
difficult. I would like to have
No,
a
what?
general conversation with you.
So, okay, I see what you're trying to get at. So I'm looking at it now, it's like after action.
Christian, you're gonna be a star. How do you feel?
No. I've been in this game for a long time. You just know me, like, I'm sure looking kind of deep, you know, I'm good at this. Manifest destiny got me here.
Okay, that's enough. Gabriel, how do you feel?
Manifest destiny, you know what I'm saying?
I feel pretty good.
You know,
Jared, how do you
manifest
feel?
destiny got me.
We're just gonna have that at the end of the video. What are you gonna be discussing today, ma'am?
This is
Advantages of the North. The North had many. Stop licking my leg. the North.
in your words, the Confederacy took an L.
Excuse me, Sir Hank. What are your opinions on life in the Civil War?
Get away from me! Get away from me!
Thank you. Your input is very appreciated. What do we have in the yeehaw?
Dude, Wyoming isn't even real.
Hey, my favorite slave.
It's a really small slave.
What does it do? Can it even clean dishes?
My bodyguard.
Fine.
Who was leading the Confederacy?
The real PGT, y'all.
Alright. Do you want to ask it again?
Do that.
Persephone said enemy skills to save us.
I love you. You love me. Let's all go kill Barney with the baseball bat and a 4x4. No more purple dinosaurs.
Oh god.
Ming.
For our evidential piece, we're calling Christ's Little Max. Okay, I messed up. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Stop.
Sorry, because people kept laughing
Mr.
in the back.
Goodwin, what do you think?
Y'all take L's. Bernax and Clackalum, come back. I might have to change your name so no one laughs. Bernax and Clackalum.